Okay, thank you all very much for coming. It's nice to see so many faces here. I'd like to begin just by welcoming you on behalf of the Swiss Re Institute, the Tech Transformation Team, and the various teams representing Swiss Re in the UK here for you today. I'm just going to get used to this, walking around in circles. I'm not going to fall off, I don't think. We've done this on purpose because Swiss Re has a proud history of more than 150 years. But we're trying to do something a little bit different today, and we've used this 360-degree environment to create a more immersive experience, and we think it'll help us to be a bit more open and intimate in the dialogue as we talk today about the transformation of our industry. The way we've been understanding and identifying and assessing and pricing risk is starting to change, I think we'd all agree. Historically, we've been quite successful with this looking in the rearview mirror type approach, where there's lots of data and we can just analyse risk that way. But with the advent of new risk pools emerging pretty much on a daily basis, the old methods don't really work so well. So, we can't spend so much time looking backwards. We have to look at the new, which has no data, in different ways. And we now have tools at our disposal, very tech-driven, very data-driven tools that are allowing us to do that. So what we want to do today is begin by asking ourselves a question. What is this next generation of underwriting? To begin that, we're going to start a journey, which is kind of starting today here with us. We're going to take several months over it, but we're quite proud of the fact that we are starting here and now in London. And that journey is to explore the modern way of underwriting. It's kind of appropriate because although London is steeped in tradition, it's been 300-400 years worth of history. London's also a bit of a centre now for insurtech hubs starting. And we think this interesting combination of tradition and technology is really going to create a kind of interesting dialogue and dynamic for us here. So what we've done today, we've gathered about 20 experts from internally and externally. They're experts in insurtech and in technology, underwriting and insurance strategy. And they're here today to help us begin this exploration and understanding of how we change the insurance value chain. Now, it gives me great pleasure and quite a lot of relief to be able to say that I'm getting a lot of help this afternoon. I think she tried to settle my nerves a little bit at lunchtime by saying that she normally broadcasts to an audience of up to 300 million people, which is, I think we're going to be okay today. But I'd really like to welcome on stage and introduce you to the BBC broadcaster, Victoria Fritz.
Thanks very much, Simon. Hello. Well, this is new, I have to say. I'm normally in 2D, something a little bit more like that. I'm used to a cameraman, and that's about it. So not only to appear in 3D, but it feels more like 4D, being on this kind of octagonal stage. That's a little bit new for me. So the reason we're here today, I'll put my notes down here, is we're all talking about the next generation of underwriting, what that really means, and what it means to move from something like risk coverage, which is something that we're all more familiar with in the room, to something more like risk prevention. We've talked already a little bit about journeys. Unfortunately, you might hear that a few more times over the course of today. How do you make that journey? Where do you start? Well, the first thing you need to do is to set the scene. We need to try and understand what these issues are. What is a tech-driven insurance sector look like? Who's already in this space? Who's doing well? Who are the laggards? Who's behind? And how do we make that change? How do we get to where we want to be and be competitive in 5 to 10 years' time? So in terms of the program, you can see it's on your computer screens all the way around you. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do our first session. And this is very much hearing from people who've got different specialisms all across the space. And we're going to hear from them about what they think are some of the drivers for sort of a tech-driven insurance industry. And what are some of the key challenges as well? Because lots of people have been talking about this, but trying to get talks like this and what we're doing here today into an 18-month transformational program, that is quite new and quite different. So we'll do that first. Then don't worry that we'll have a little break. There'll be an innovation session where we'll talk about some of these ideas, taking them into practice, what that means for you. Then you can get some coffee and revive yourself. And then we'll talk about our second session after the break, which will be about a kind of an outsider's point of view. Who's already working in this kind of space? We're talking about ecosystems and what that means for everyone in this room. What can you learn from other industries, other people, and what do they see when they're looking in at your industry? Where do they see the challenges? Where do they see the opportunities? What can you learn from them? And what collaborations and partnerships can you get going from today and take forward into your business? So it gives me great pleasure to bring up my first panelist up onto the stage. We've got Dr. Luca Marighetti, who is gracefully standing in today. He got the call this morning saying, could he please take the session because someone was sick. I hope he chose the bow tie regardless, or irrespective, I should say, of his appearance today. Very natty. We've got Hayley Robinson, who has been in this industry a very long time at a very big company, some really big insights into what's going on there. We've got Jacqueline McNamee, who's just set up a new company, well, about 2 years in. Year and a half in. So a very different perspective, and we'll try and work out why she moved from a big player to a small player and see what happens there. And we've got Schuh as well. He's going to be bringing his insights. So please, could you join me on the stage? Thank you. So if anyone wants to know more about the good folk we've got up on this stage here, it is all in your brochures with the exception of Luca, who you're just going to have to look at his LinkedIn profile, I suppose. Right, let's start off this session. We are really living in extraordinary times. I mean, I think when we look back at this period in history, you know, our children and our children's children will be talking about the next industrial age. We're talking tech. I mean, it's transformed so many aspects of business, of society, of culture. And yet, from an outsider, as a broadcaster, it appears to me that the insurance sector seems like a little bit of a laggard. I don't know if you in the room would agree with that, or whether it perhaps suits you to stay as you are. We'll be discussing that. So our speakers today have been thinking about how much the industry has been transformed to date by tech and by the digital age, and what more could be done. So I think we'll start with you, Hayley, if we can. How far do you think we are on this journey?
I think if you compare us to other industries, we're actually at the start of the journey, and you see the evolution of other industries and realise, I think as an industry, we're laggards. I think within our industry, though, there are parts that are further forward. And, you know, technology-driven underwriting has been in personal lines for 20 years. You can get a quote online now without asking a single question. So there is the innovation and technology, I would say, supporting personal lines. That's starting to move into SME, where the real laggard is mid-market, large and complex risks, and you still see people walking around with slipcases in the London market, which is quite archaic in the current world. So some progress, it's coming, but we are behind other industries, I would say.
Now, Luca, you've been working at different companies. I know you were at McKinsey for a while. You're head of transformation here. I mean, do you think that that's fair? Do you think you are a laggard?
I think the technology is impacting insurance in a way that is different from most other industries. So it happens alongside two axes. One is the way we manufacture the product, if you want. Okay, and there is about acquiring technology and data sets and changing the processes that we use from underwriting to policy issuing, claim settlement, and the like. So that is the operational part. So there's a lot happening there, but also a number of problems that have not been solved yet. Things such as handwriting recognition. You would think it is solved, it is not. Okay? And that is proving a problem. Small things are a kind of an obstacle. And then there's another aspect, which is Technology is changing the nature and size of risk pools. Every industry is affected. Insurance is involved in every industry. So that is coming with a time lag, and only now we are starting to realize what it actually means. So that is natural, happening naturally later, a few years later than the rest. So now, having said that, it's not like everybody in the insurance industry would say, yoo-hoo, technology is coming, we jump on it. There's a lot of fear and a lot of lack of understanding of what it actually means. And there's a lot of educational work that needs to be done in order for people to appreciate what you can do with it.
Jacqueline, listening to that, I wonder whether, I don't know, I might be wrong or presumptuous in saying this, whether perhaps some frustration in the speed of change might be one of the reasons why you decided to move from AIG and start up your own firm.
Yes, it does. I think the speed of change. I will acknowledge what Hayley and Luca have said. I think technology is on the bus. I think it's on its way. I don't think the bus has quite landed here yet. And I think the awareness is building by just having the forums that we're participating in today, building that awareness. I do agree with certainly what I've encountered in the last couple of years in setting out to raise financing, to start a new business, and to the journey that we had going live earlier this year. You know, there is a variety of attitudes out there, Luca, as you said. Some people thoroughly embrace it, people are resisting it, and some people dismiss it. But I think it's coming. And I think the reason it's coming is because the opportunity has been quantified. I think there is a real appetite for change out there, whether it's in the distribution chain from our broker partners or whether it's direct from customers. And customers are going to demand change in respect to how they deal in their personal lives as well as actually how their own businesses are transforming. And I also think it can be accomplished because I thoroughly agree with what Hayley said in relation to it's been done before in very administrative, bureaucratic industries like the banking industry, and what fintech brought to kind of keep poking the pace of change in the banking industry. Personal lines did endeavor on their journey in, I think it was 1986 when it started in relation to slash and burn and getting rid of unnecessary cost. And then followed it up with going online in the 90s and now really embracing data and modeling and data analytics. A lot of that, and I know we'll probably talk about the how later on, we are embracing that model. We're embracing kind of the model that Personal Lines has done. And you can do it, we can deliver it in a year. It doesn't take 20 years to accomplish the speed of change. So I think there's a lot of good lessons out there in respect to learning. But it has to move, and it has to move at pace because everybody else and all other industries are transforming around us, and we have to capture that opportunity and not be afraid of it.
Eric, are you as optimistic?
But generally, extremely optimistic. I think if there's a point to make where we are lagging behind, I would say that we're sometimes lagging behind in the actually consequence of doing things. So if I think of times when I was working at a bank here in London almost 20 years ago, and technologies like email and whatever, right, of course existed, I had to call clients every day, right? And I had a list on my screen, and I could click the email, and then the phone would dial the number, and I would call the client or leave a voicemail. And basically what my boss told me is that you do that every day, that list of clients. Just do it. And then occasionally, a few years later, you had blast voicemails. He said, okay, you record once a week or whatever. When you have something to say, one of these voicemails, it will automatically be distributed to clients. They'll get your message. They can then choose to ignore what you have to say. Right? But, so I think sometimes I feel in other companies, we just then implement things very quickly. Whereas my experience in the insurance industry is that there's often a bit of a debate, and there's always a good reason why not yet. And maybe that's also because sometimes in the past there's been a time where good ideas in insurance tended to mean loss-making ideas that cost a lot of money. But personally, I think maybe there was a bit of a thing like that a few years ago where there was maybe just a statistical accumulation of a few things that just didn't go well. But you can't just keep your head in the sand just because there were a few mistakes. I mean, this is not fail faster or what we say nowadays, right?
Absolutely. Now, in order to get the most out of this session, we're asking everyone if you can please contribute as much as you like. We've got 2 microphones that will be doing the rounds. There's one over there. There will be another one nearby. So please do get involved with your questions. There is also a hashtag as well. So if you want to take part in this discussion online as well, that is also just as valid. So please do ask questions. Feel free to ask whatever you like. We want this to be challenging. We want this to be a debate. If you have something specific to your business that you would like to ask some of the panelists, then that's absolutely fine. In terms of, I just want to pick up on something that you said there, Eric, about sticking your head in the sand and innovative ideas perhaps being seen as loss-making. I wonder whether there is a genuine appetite to change in the industry, because there are a lot of vested interests in the status quo.
Yes, I agree, but yet it's excuses, right? Because I have yet to come to a client meeting where a client would not want to talk about these topics. Would a client want to pay us royally for every great idea that Swiss Re thinks we are bringing to the table? Of course not. It's a negotiation and all that, right? But if I just look at the session that will follow this one on solutions, which is what I'm responsible for at Swiss Re, talking about smart analytics, parametrics, automotive, safe homes, cyber, who doesn't need to solve these problems? I mean, this is the world we live in. It's just simply the problem to be solved today. What we are trying to achieve as a business, as an industry, is of course growth and higher margins and better efficiencies. But the world around us is quite technological world right now. And that is something, if we don't tackle it, I mean, somebody else will do it. In fact, somebody in the insurance industry will tackle it better, and others will tackle it worse. And then you will have winners and losers. So in a way, you don't have to do anything. It will happen, right? The question is, where do you want to play on that curve? You want to be ahead or you want to be behind? If you're too far ahead, it's also risky. I think this is the skill probably that you have to have.
Yes, it certainly is. Just out of interest, a show of hands, who has tried to develop a sort of a tech-driven solution in their business? Just out of interest, who's trying to do this kind of thing already? Okay, so quite a number of people. Just I saw you put your hand up there. What kind of response have you had in your company to trying to implement change? If you could just let me know where you're from as well. It'd just be interesting to hear your experience.
I'm from Italy. My name is Alessandra. We'll be part of the last session, and I'm working in I'm an IT provider, but I lead the innovation companies in my group. So, being the responsible of the innovation, they had to let me go and try. So let's say the company believes that innovation and tech-driven solutions are key to follow up the digitalization and all the path. And let's say that if what is difficult is to be less empirical and to be more practical, because on paper many technologies for digitalization are great. Like I struggle a lot with blockchain. I think
we all do.
Yeah, I tried for 3 years to build, to apply blockchain, for something useful, and I failed. So blockchain is now parked on the side. So I see good responses from the market and from my company when it comes to technology like artificial intelligence, or where you bring efficiency, you bring speed, you bring you speed up the time to market of your products. You better know your customer. You build something tailored experience. So these are value and benefits that company can feel. While with blockchain, no idea which benefit I could bring on the table to embrace it. Okay. But yes, it's I found a good support. But of course you need to bring back also results, and innovation and technology and digitalization are not to bring in real business case and results very fast.
No, but then look at the likes of Amazon and Google. It might have taken them some time, but then look at the scale they've achieved. Thanks very much, Alessandra. Hayley, I was just interested in your thought as we were hearing from Alessandra about trying to implement change in a big company, how easy is that? Because we were talking over lunch about how lots of the bigger companies are really the amalgamation of lots of smaller companies, and they have their own culture, their own heritage, their own way of doing things. And it might be quite difficult to roll things out across a group.
I think it is difficult. I think it is difficult in any large organisation with a legacy. And when you have companies that have merged a number of times, you have companies with systems from 1979. I work for one of them, and they don't talk to things that were built in 2018. So it can be really difficult to implement change. And that's what I think that's one of the biggest challenges for the insurance industry is how do you keep your current business going? Because there's a lot of value in that business and that drives the profit currently at the same time as moving yourself forward and modernising. And I think that's the thing we're all trying to work through in the best way possible. But it is hard. The lady over there talked about you need a business case. A finance director wants to know if I'm spending 5 million, what am I getting in terms of increased revenue and profit or efficiency? And sometimes you just have to say to people, it's a leap of faith. And I think with data and analytics, it is a leap of faith. You can't afford not to do it, but it's really hard to show a business case on some of these things.
Just out of interest, who in the room has tried to go with a strategy like this to the CFO, maybe of their company, the money man or woman, should we say, and sell them in this idea? I mean, what sort of reception have those ideas been getting in your companies? There's a lady at the back with the curly hair and the glasses.
Thank you. Hello. I'm Janet Henderson. I'm from Brit. So I'm on the underwriting side, and we have been trying to move along. We are making some good progress, and my financial director is actually quite open to these ideas. But I think there's a fear factor from the embedding the change, which is one of the things that you mentioned. But there is also, we just can't afford not to be doing this. You mentioned Amazon earlier on. They've taken on banking. They're going to take on insurance. They are eating our lunch. We have to get on and do this. There is no excuse. So it almost doesn't matter what they say. You have to have an enlightened, hopefully, finance director on board who will realise that we just have to do this. There isn't a choice. The longer we stand around and debate it, the more behind we will be. And another interesting thing that we've been trying to discuss, will there be such a thing as brokers and insurers separately? Will we just be insurance companies? Because, the insurers are worried they're just capital and brokers are getting more innovative from that point of view. And brokers are worried that insurers are saying, well, we can go direct to market, so do we really need you? I think everybody has value to be added, but we just need to pull together as an industry and get on with it, really.
Eric, I saw you putting up your hand as well.
Well, this is basically the task that we have as a solution team. I couldn't agree more that the internal, there's a range of ways you could do it, right? You could put things into a lab and treat it as kind of research in the sense that you're willing to spend money on something, and if something good comes out, fine, right? The other extreme is you do business as usual and everything just competes on the marginal profit that it generates. Now, if you do the lab strategy, I think you should do an element of that. But if that's the only thing you did, the problem is that at one point you have to convince the business to adopt what you want, which then becomes a cliff event. If you only do the other thing, where everyone competes along the same sort of measures, of course you never innovate, because there will always be a bigger deal that is more standard than a cash cow today. So you have to go into this painful area of doing all of this in between. And to me, I don't find it contradictory. It's just painful for the people who are doing it. Being agile and in that space is not necessarily fun. It's painful. And as long as it works, you're there. And if it doesn't work, then you will be an external expert, not an internal expert anymore. Fine, right? That's tricky. But to me, the way you could break this is in that we don't call these things all research. Nothing wrong with research, but research, in my mind, is where we take money in order to acquire new knowledge, which is required, right? Applied research, not university research. Innovation, to me, is the exact opposite. You take that knowledge, what you have or what you can build or achieve, and turn this into the business of tomorrow with a business case. Of course, maybe the money is not here in the third month, maybe in the first year, maybe in the second year. Once you do that consequently, and you don't just go for incremental stuff, but also have a portfolio which includes a few bigger bets, and I think it works. But is there always an element of a leap of faith, and do you need to find enough people who want to do that, who are powerful enough? I mean, yeah, that is why there is management. I mean, all of us are in one form of management, and you get paid for making this happen in large, complex organizations with lots of brains. I think that is the way to go about it.
But if I can I step in?
Yes, of
Because
course,
I would
Luca,
like
step
to
in.
go back to the finance function,
Yes.
because that is something that I find quite distressing in a sense.
What do you mean by that?
I
What do you find
mean,
distressing?
The finance function is highly unproductive in any company that I've seen, and I've worked across at least 15 industries, okay? And it's particularly bad in insurance. So the cost they generate is huge. They, in many cases, don't have the accounting under control. In some cases, getting a bill paid is a nightmare, employing many, many people. So I think they should look after their own business and start using technology. And actually, in that particular case, would be rather easy to get a business straight. And the moment they did that, they would understand how technology can help in many other functions, making quite some leap towards the future. But sitting there and saying, show me your business case, I would respond, show me the business case for the existence of your function, the way it is set up today. And people are laughing, so I guess people know what I'm talking about.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Jacqueline, you want to step in?
Just listening to some of the recent comments, and I understand firsthand the frustrations and the challenges in respect to getting business cases through, but I think what goes to kind of the heart of some of the drivers that my own personal experience on this journey has been in relation to getting to the root causes of some of these challenges. And I think that is in my experience, sometimes too, you get caught up with the short-term isms, the short-term expense saving. How will I do that? Let's get rid of headcount. Let's lift and shift. And that's fine. They're short-term measures. But this industry has to grapple with getting to the root causes, fundamentally, of what the drivers of our challenges are collectively. And I think it connects everything. And it really is that technology to me is not the solution. You have to get to the root cause. And I think some of those root causes are really entrenched in the complicated process and workflows that we have, the disconnectivity we have between the customer flowing through the entire underwriting journey, the claims journey, the finance journey, right into the reinsurance industry. And a lot of that is getting to the heart of the data. And I think if you look at the successes of other industries, it's hard, it's very painful, but you have to start getting structure around your data, because if you can get your data fixed right at the outsource, it starts to automatically correct some of those flow problems that you have from the disconnect from one department to the other. I think if you can correct your workflow and you can start really concentrating the discipline, it is hard and it takes a lot of discipline to fix your data structure, that starts to change the way that you can underwrite. Then you start enabling that with technology, and then you enable it with data analytics. So I can relate to the challenges. I think probably the advantage is that someone in our situation is a relatively new company, is we don't come from a legacy background. We came out with a clean sheet and said, if we didn't have to reflect on the 20, 30 years of experience that this industry has, it's a lot longer than that, I do know, but if you had a clean sheet today, you couldn't draw how complicated it is. And you say, how will I do it differently? But it's getting the workflow. What does the customer want? What does the user want? What does an underwriter want to do? What does a claims person want to do? What does a finance person want to do? What does a broker want to do for their customer? If you design around that and you can fix your data, our problems will start to sort themselves out in the future. And I think the rate and the pace and the acceleration that we can change will start to pick up. But data discipline, data standardization, data purity is difficult, because we have tons of it in the commercial space, but it's in everybody's head, it's in everybody's drawers, it's in files, it's in disconnected systems. So I think some of these are just trying to, as collectively as an industry, we have to come together and resolve these, because we can build new, fresh. Our plug has to fit into the socket of this industry we're all connected to.
Just out of curiosity, how does the performance of an insurtech relate to one of the more traditional players? I mean, what sort of margins are you seeing?
I think there's obviously, it's relatively new. We're a relatively new business, so there is a degree of time. But I think the timelines are different in how you jump. We started a business and you could get to launching within 9 months. The second product will come out in a shorter period of time. We have the advantage of agility, speed of decision making, problem solving. We brought outsiders in. We brought people with technology and expertise in. We have those advantages, and we can be innovative and we can build solutions. But we still have to partner with the industry as well. We're small. We still have to partner with capacity. We have to partner with the distribution industry. So I think, sometimes I look at it and go, we have these advantages, but the pluses are the bigger companies, they have the balance sheet, they have the resources, they have the big purse. So I think it's going to be a dynamic. I think it's going to become a partnership in time. I think we all need each other in respect to taking the learnings that we can do in an isolated environment, but we still have to work within the ecosystem collectively that we operate in.
Now, listening to all of this, it seems to me that a lot of people might feel slightly threatened, perhaps, or the industry might collectively feel quite threatened by the speed of change happening in other industries, and the fact that there is this kind of desire for change and to be closer to the data. Hayley, as the head of underwriting, who is tomorrow's underwriter? Is it a very different person to the person who's doing the job today? Is it a very different skill set? I mean, should people be worried about their own jobs?
I think what the underwriter does today will be very different in the future. And there is research out there that says 98% of what an underwriter does today will disappear. That doesn't mean to say underwriting jobs will disappear, but they will look very different. And I think some of our own thoughts are, that the underwriter, so some of the underwriters maybe aren't as numerate as you'd want them to be. In the future world, that's non-negotiable. So you need underwriters who can negotiate, who are numerate, who can look at solutions for the customer, and who are probably dealing with the customer much more than they are now and finding solutions. And you referenced earlier, I think the insurance industry will be moving and has to move just away from protection to prevention. The best thing is if Sorry. The best thing is if we can prevent some of these things happening. So I do think it will be very different. I think that means it is scary, and that's why there is a degree of resistance. For those people who still have jobs, they're going to be so much more exciting than they are today. And I would say most underwriters spend 80% of their time inputting and administration, and at best, they're doing 20% design, solutioning, and great things for the customer.
Just very quickly, if I can bring you, Luca, back into the conversation, and then hopefully you've had some time to think of some questions you can ask our esteemed panelists here. We talk a lot about disruption in this industry, the need now for disruption in this industry. What does successful disruption look like in your view?
Well, I'm known for hating this expression, disruption. Now, there's a lot of noise around tech and digitization and so on in the industry, and this is confusing many people. And then people go to conferences, come back very excited, and then nothing happens. Then
that won't happen today, by the way.
So, I think the real fundamental change, I prefer to speak about fundamental change than disruption, will happen in the realm of data and data management. So insurance in the modern sense of the word has always been about understanding data, quantitative data, and make some meaningful predictions about the future, and then decide to take a risk for a certain price and help other industries doing their job better with less capital. I mean, that's in essence the easy story. Now, the data generation that we see in many places, from predictive maintenance to sensors now all over the world to satellite images and so on, are actually helping predicting risk. We're coming from a world of understanding and covering risk and moving to a world of predicting and preventing. This prediction and prevention is what is going to change the nature and size of risk pools. And I think that's the biggest change that we're going to experience. That will go with the change in productivity, but the change in productivity is more pedestrian in a sense. There's a lot of work, but it's easier to imagine, where it's a change in the size and nature of risk pools. You know, take cyber risk. 5 years ago, nobody was talking about cyber risk, believe it or not. Today is talk of the town. Does anybody know how to insure it? Do we have an unlimited capacity for it? No, we're taking some bets, trying to understand it. So, but that is going to be the model of our risk pools going forward. You know, the machine, the world, the economy, everything is moving to machines. Machines break down, and whether that's malevolent attack or is decaying legacy systems, it doesn't really matter. There is a damage. Can we insure that? Can we predict that? Can we prevent it? That's a big question that many insurance companies, including us, are spending a lot of time and effort trying to understand and solve. But those are the real dramatic changes, if you want, that the industry is going to face.
It just reminds me, actually, not so very long ago, Inmarsat, I don't know if you know, that the satellite communications company, I was doing a film with them, and I went into their satellite office, not too far from here, actually, and they have one room, a control room, which is where they can see all the satellites going around the Earth. They can also see all the planes and all the ships that they are directing by satellite as well. And so they've got all these things directed all over the globe. And then there is a separate control room just for cyber, and it's a war room. And you go in, and there is a map on the wall, and all the people in there are heavily tattooed, bearded data scientists, and they actually have a clock on the wall and a counter, and much like a call center, sort of calls waiting, you have number of ongoing red alert cyber threats going on all over the world, and you can see the counter constantly running up. It's unbelievable, you know, dozens of big cyber attacks happening simultaneously around the world. So cyber, to your point, is very real, and the people who are working on it, or perhaps not necessarily the people you might imagine. So hopefully, I'd like to open this discussion up to the floor. You've had some chance to hear some of the thoughts from our panelists here. Just to remind you of the names, and we've got Eric here, Jacqueline, Luca, and Hayley. If you could please, when you are asking a question, if you could identify yourself and make sure that you use the microphone as well, because we are being recorded here and it's going all around the world apparently. So just to make sure that you get your 5 seconds of fame, if you could speak up and into the microphone, that would be great. So who would like to ask the first question? We've got one in the front, just here.
Thank you, Tobias from BMW. So we talked about insurtechs, and we had the view of a new founder of a new company. So Hayley, one question to you. There's a lot of hype about startups, and I think the hype is now for a couple of years. And personally, I always think insurers have a lot of data sets, so they make the assessment. They are the risk carriers. How much of a risk do you see from an insurance perspective, the startups? Is it just you learn something from them, or do you rather think partnering because they really bring some benefits to you?
I think it's some and some. So I think, you know, if you see some of the insurtechs who are trying to get into the insurer space, and particularly in personal lines, they can get to a certain size and then they don't have the brand. And people still buy from brands they recognize. So I think that's been a little bit of a challenge from some of the people moving into the insurer space, which is, I think, why you see a lot more of them wanting to partner, and they do genuinely offer some good opportunities. You know, we've partnered, in my employer, we've sponsored an innovation forum across the world as a competition, and we've partnered with some of the winners on there, and they're providing us with things that really we couldn't build as cheaply ourselves, and we couldn't deploy as quickly. But you're right, our data is still very powerful. I have a team who can do things better and faster than some of the people who are trying to sell me that data, and they can do it more accurately. And that's why we invest in that team. But actually that's important to me because I can prove that we can do it better, cheaper and faster and more accurately by continuing to invest there. So I think it's horses for courses. I think you ignore them at your peril, but equally you leap in and spend billions at your peril as well.
Thanks very much, Tobias. Do we have any further questions? Yes, there's a gentleman just behind in the second row with the great hair.
Thank you.
All I can see is hair at this angle, to be honest.
So I've heard loads about technology and all that. And I'm hoping I'm not offending too many people, but reinsurance as an industry is now a very sexy industry. And there's an age-old saying that, you're only as good as your people. So I'd be interested to get a view from the panel, what you guys are doing to attract the younger generation.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Alex from Swiss Re.
Can I pick this one? Because
Okay, Luca.
I would contest. I mean,
Sell it to Alex.
I've worked in at least 15 industries. I've never seen anything sexier than reinsurance. So, sorry.
Good God, I bet you didn't think you were getting that today.
It's very arcane. It's a very difficult thing to explain. We're insuring insurance companies, but from an intellectual challenge, thinking second, third, fourth, fifth order problems is actually a fascinating exercise, and I think it also makes a huge contribution toward resilience. Now, with regard to attracting people to the industry, I think there's a general problem with insurance, because when people think insurance, they think the image coming up their mind is the tied agents or the broker, the provincial broker around the corner with crazy hair, knocking on their doors and being that's the image that emerges. And actually, with my former employers that happened to be Zurich, we did even a study, and we saw that insurance in the ranking of all industry in terms of attractiveness for young talent was kind of number 45 or 46, so pretty much down the road. However, the other thing I've learned is that when we go and talk to highly talented graduated, and we start telling them what the industry actually does. Forget the tied agents with crazy hair. Think about what the industry actually performs. They're all fascinated. So, and we have programs going on from MIT to Tsinghua University where we're accessing that talent, and it's not that difficult to win them over. The issue is more that then you need to win them over and then to groom them, and it takes 10 years before they become truly productive in terms of having a proper understanding of risk and how the business works. But that will come true. I'm not that particularly concerned, but we need to explain to them what we do. If we don't, they will make up their own image.
Yeah, it's certainly a good start. Eric, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I mean, the next generation of people coming through, the next generation of underwriters, they're tech savvy, they expect a lot. They expect a lot of their employers as well, and they don't necessarily expect a career for life. And insurance and reinsurance more generally has been seen as a pretty safe, nice option with a nice, easy lunch at the top of the gherkin. So what is it that's going to keep them at big companies like Swiss Re?
So the only 3 times I've been at top of the gherkin was always when clients were involved. And if you work here, it's unlikely you'll be invited. So I think I could say a lot of things. I have found it amazingly easy to hire people who are a lot smarter than me. And you know, especially nowadays with analytics, you can hire people straight off university, and they will add value on day one because they know stuff that you don't, and that is highly relevant. You just need to find a way to understand that the data analytics of today will be, together with what we know is actuarial science today, the future of whatever that will be called then, right? It's obvious, it will just take a bit of time. But I think, other than me talking, maybe I'll put two of my colleagues on the spot, who I see in the front row, who are, and I don't want to age discriminate, but they are younger than me and have joined the company recently, you know, a few years ago. So maybe Olivia and Andrea, do you want to say a word or two on what attracted you to join Swiss Re?
There might be a drink in it for you later.
So Andrea works in the automotive solutions team, and Olivia in the analytics team, the data analytics team.
Yes, hi. I'm Andrea, and I joined Swiss Re 5 years ago. I actually joined through one of the graduate programs. Well, what attracted me to make it, Luca explained a bit the complexity of the work we do, but what makes me motivated to work at Swiss Re is to get the responsibility to build up new things and be given the trust to, you know, to do things and interact with clients and try to bring solutions to life.
And I joined even more recently, so I actually joined Swiss Re back in August. And I came from many years in banking where I was looking at the industry from the outside. And for me, it was really that ability to shape some of the changes that from the outside you just look at and you talk about and you say, well, that seems to be a good idea, that seems to be a bad idea. But actually the scale of change that's going on and just the diversity of things you really can influence yourself, that for me was really the driving factor. And I can see you do actually have a lot of scope to do that on the inside. So lots of fascinating things going on, as we've heard.
The interesting work and autonomy. I promise we didn't plant them, and that wasn't a planted question. Thanks very much, Alex. I hope you're happy with your choice of employer. Good. Thumbs up. We've got a thumbs up. Hayley, it looks like you wanted to add something quickly.
I just wanted to add, I think probably nobody in this room chose insurance. Very few people choose insurance. You know, you fall into it and then you realise it's very diverse, you know, and you can do whatever you want to do, and most people end up staying. I think the challenge is those people who are capable of working in a data and analytics world have far more choice than they ever used to. In the old days, they became actuaries. Nowadays, they can go and, you know, work in fun organizations like Google or Facebook, which is far more exciting than insurance. So at the outset, I think, or perception probably. And I think, therefore, as the insurance industry, we've still got some work to do. And it's probably not about talking about a career in insurance. It's probably talking about the content of the role rather than its insurance. And I think a lot of young people today have a massive social conscience. They care about the world and they care about people. And I think we can latch on to that because insurance is a massive social benefit that can help the world and can help people. And I think that's part of how we unlock that new generation coming into insurance.
Okay, really interesting. I think we've got time for one more question before a final thought from all our panelists. We've got one question just here. Gentleman in the navy suit.
Hi there, Alistair Wilkie from Tesco Underwriting. Probably really following on from that last comment there. How do we ensure, kind of with all these advances in technology and big data sources and uses of it, ensure that the customer isn't forgotten in amongst all of this? And are we better off using it from, I guess, a customer angle to make these advances and change?
I can see you looking at Jacqueline, and you mentioned customer-centric.
I think it's a very valid point. And I think when I talked about a blank sheet and reimagining it, it's not from the inside out. It has to come from the outside in. Now, whether that's business to consumer or it's business to business, you have to factor, it's more about the user experience and the customer experience. So say in our business, for example, which is in more kind of the mid-market space, the broker is really our customer. But if we can deliver a really good experience, very fast, faster, better, automated documentation, very high service, completely raising the bar from a service level standpoint, and you're automating a lot of the administration for them, then by default the customer is having a better experience because you're starting to reduce all the repetitiveness and the administration and asking the same questions again. So I think part of the journey that we went on was making sure that we were designing in collaboration, that we didn't sit in a lab on our own and saying, as insiders with outsiders, we can do this better ourselves. We had to go on a journey of engagement and saying to brokers and customers, how can we improve this for you? What matters? What are your pain points? What are your priorities? So I think with the tools and techniques that are available today, you always have to put, whether the customer is the user or the end buyer, you have to take that under consideration. And I think those tools and techniques are there available today. But it's a very valid point. We use the word customer a bit too loose and fast.
I have a final question for our panelists here. In all of this, I mean, it seems to me that your viewpoint, Jacqueline, is quite straightforward. It's more customer-centric, leaner organizations that are sort of purer with the data. I wonder what you think the winning solution is. If you look at the insurers, if you were 5 years from now and you're looking back, we'll start with you, Eric. Who do you think will be winning in this race and why? What are the factors for success, do you think?
So you mean second to fifth place after reinsurance as number one, of course, would be, let me think, difficult to say if you want to pinpoint a topic, I feel, because a lot of things are evolving. If I look at solutions at Swiss Re, we have financial targets like everyone else has in this room. And if I see what delivered our results in last year, about a third of what delivered the results, so we delivered our plan, but that was stuff that we actually had not planned for. So things that actually happened, not planless, but things are evolving quickly, as Luca put it with cyber and so on. So what you plan today, I think it's very likely that in 5 years from now, what you will deliver is more than 50% different from that, just purely mathematically. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a plan today, obviously, but I think you need to be prepared that even your best plan might have changed in a reasonable amount of time. And so I think that type of agility to be focused, but at the same time also be open-minded for what will be the scalable part. I think that is a very winning strategy. And then if I could name just another one, other than data and analytics and knowing how to do it, I think that's more like table stakes almost to me. Everyone will need to figure that out. The other thing will be about knowing when you do it yourself and when you partner. And I think if I look at one of the biggest privileges of being in my role or that part of Swiss Re is that we partner with a lot of people outside of Swiss Re, often industries that are actually outside of the insurance industry a little bit. These industry barriers and borders are blending. Ecosystems evolve that are different from what we know today. Now these meetings make you a lot smarter when you have a plan, when you have a strategy how to actually put it together into something that could work in 5 years from now. So to me, that's one of the biggest asks that you have to get your head around. How do you choose when to work with a startup, when to work with your client, when to work with another industry player in order to achieve scalable progress, right? That's the two things I would name.
Okay, so a sort of iterative innovation and collaboration partnerships, in essence.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be that iterative. I don't think it has to be baby steps. I mean, it can be bold steps, right? It can be a partnership that might not have been super obvious even, but it has to be the one that you actually feel makes sense, right? And I think right now there's a lot of room to make decisions that maybe in a few years from now will be quite normal, right? But now, if you can be 2-3 years faster than a few others, I think there's something to gain.
Certainly the dream, isn't it? Jacqueline, what about you? What do you think is sort of the key driver of success of businesses that will be successful 5 years from now?
I think the courage to embrace change is the starting point. and having then the vision, what does that change look like? And then also executing. We can't sit around and keep talking about this because the clock's ticking. So execution has to be done and has to be done well, and it has to be done in a service, with service and raising standards in mind. And I think kind of sometimes when I think about this, I summarize it with something a broker said to me kind of maybe 9 months ago, 12 months ago. We were quite new in the journey. He said, I love what you're doing, and I hate what you're doing. And I thought, you know, it was an interesting dichotomy in relation to his point, and I've subsequently reflected on it. He said, I love what you're doing because it is the right thing. It's deliberate, it's well thought through, it's common sense. I hate what you're doing is because does it put people's, when I talk about, my point here is when you talk about courage and execution, I hate what you're doing because is it putting jobs at risks? Yeah. Is it putting underwriters and brokers' jobs at risks? And my answer to him at the time, and I still kind of, and I'm still reflecting on this point because it was raised by several of you in the audience. My answer to that was, well, there's no such thing as a job for life in insurance or probably any industry anymore. There's a lot of jobs that are being lifted and shifted. There's a lot of redundancies being made ahead. But if we have the opportunity to reskill, to retrain people, to embrace the new generation with the experience of the older generation, then a lot of, hopefully, the rewards will come out of the jobs that we're building. So I think in that regard, I think it's to get to your point, Victor, I think it's really about, it is about the vision. It's about having the courage to do it, execute it, but do it well too, and factor in the pros and cons and the advantages, the challenges and the opportunities.
Luca, how do you do it well? How do you execute this change that's required?
I think for me an important thing is to empower everybody in the company to do the stuff. It's not like, you know, there's this dream, I build the ivory tower, I put very intelligent innovation teams, and it doesn't work. I've not seen that working anywhere. What works is actually when you enable people to do it themselves. And for that, you need to expose them to the right technology companies, the right, you know, not every engineering that emerges everywhere is real engineering. There's a lot of hot air. So expose them, make sure they only interact with true, solid, robust engineering companies, and then help them understand the concepts. You know, from that point of view, understanding technology is not that difficult. You don't need to be a Python coder to understand technology. In some cases, you will need then Python coders, of course you do. And then make sure that people understand that's actually their responsibility to understand what's going on and is relevant for their function based on business need and use cases, as opposed to, you know, fancy, let's do something with blockchain type of exercises that lead nowhere. And then is a change management process that takes years. You don't do that overnight. And so when people ask me, oh, how large is your innovation team in your role? I say, my innovation team is 14,500, everybody. I think that attitude needs to percolate through organization, and then you need to invest in enabling it. And this is difficult. I'm not saying that happens overnight. It takes years. But I think at the end of the day, I'm sorry, but the incumbents will win. But that will be the incumbents who are able to go through that process. Because indeed, they have the brand, they have the credibility, they have the customer base, they have the balance sheet, they have a different risk position. And there are a number of huge incumbents advantage in this industry that goes beyond what you see in other industries. And to leverage them is about enabling those organizations to go through the transformation. That, I think, will make the difference.
You get the final word, Hayley. Now, no one wants to be, obviously, on the wrong side of a revolution, and the tech revolution is no different. How will you stand up to the incumbents?
Well, I think, for me...
Yeah, you're on, I think.
Oh, I'm on.
Yeah.
The winners are the same. You know, insurance is no different to any other industry. In any industry, and it's same in insurance, is the winners are the people who understand what their customers want, deliver what their customers want, and can adapt to changing circumstances and are agile. And I couldn't agree more with Jackie. And it's about execution on that journey as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much to all our panellists today. If we could just give them a round of applause, please. So I hope you've found that session useful. Next up, we've got Olivia Brindle, who's going to be taking you through the innovation sessions. Thank you very much.